Caleb stood quietly at his locker, fingers nervously fumbling with the dial. His eyes darted down the bustling hallway of Lincoln High School, a sea of teenagers moving with synchronized chaos. He was new, having moved from Baltimore to this predominantly white suburb near Chicago just 2 months earlier. Adjusting had been difficult enough socially, but academically Caleb had thrived. His grades reflected a sharp mind and meticulous preparation. Yet today, something felt off. A tap on his shoulder jolted him from his thoughts. It was Brandon Walsh, the ever-cheerful soccer captain, whose sandy blonde hair and easygoing smile seemed lifted straight out of an American teen movie. "Yo, Caleb, you ready for chemistry?" Brandon said, lightly punching his shoulder. Caleb grinned, relaxing slightly. "Yeah, just worried about today's test. Mr. Donovan seems to have it out for me." Brandon shook his head dismissively. "He just takes chemistry way too seriously. You're fine. You've nailed every test so far." Caleb shrugged, but the sinking feeling remained. They made their way to Mr. Donovan's classroom, the murmurs and nervous energy of exam day buzzing around them. Inside, students shuffled into seats, pulling calculators and pencils from backpacks. Mr. Donovan, with a perpetually furrowed brow beneath his thinning silver hair, handed out tests, his eyes lingering on Caleb longer than necessary. Caleb's stomach twisted. The test began, silence settling like a heavy blanket. Caleb worked methodically through the questions, the formulas pouring effortlessly from his memory onto the page. He finished early, checked his work, and quietly turned in his test. Mr. Donovan's piercing stare seemed to follow him back to his desk. 20 tense minutes later, the bell rang. Relief flooded the room as students bolted from their seats. Caleb, Brandon, and a few others gathered near the classroom door, comparing answers in sighs of relief. Suddenly, Mr. Donovan's voice cut sharply through their conversation. "Caleb, can I speak with you, please?" The hallway fell eerily quiet. Caleb's heart raced as he nodded and followed the teacher back into the empty classroom. Mr. Donovan closed the door gently, turning to Caleb with an expression that bordered between sternness and suspicion. "Caleb, your performance on these tests has been remarkably consistent," Mr. Donovan began cautiously, peering down at the neat stack of papers on his desk. "Almost too consistent." I study hard, sir," Caleb stammered, struggling to steady his voice. Mr. Donovan leaned forward slightly. "I'm finding it difficult to believe that someone new to this school, and, frankly, from your previous academic background, could consistently achieve perfect scores without assistance." Caleb's jaw dropped, disbelief turning quickly to anger. "You're accusing me of cheating?" Mr. Donovan raised his hands defensively. "I'm not accusing anyone yet, Caleb. I'm just letting you know that your test will be under scrutiny." Without another word, Caleb stormed out into the hallway, his chest tight with rage and humiliation. Word traveled fast, and by the time he reached his next class, whispers trailed behind him like shadowy specters. That evening, Caleb sat alone at home, staring blankly at a textbook, his phone vibrating constantly. Messages poured in from classmates, some supportive, others skeptical or mocking. His parents, weary from their workday, listened gravely as Caleb recounted what had happened. They'd moved here for better opportunities, better schools, and yet now he felt as though he'd walked straight into a storm. The following morning at school was worse. Eyes lingered too long, conversations died abruptly when he walked past, and he felt an invisible spotlight magnifying his every movement. But amidst the discomfort, Brandon stood firm. "Dude, everyone knows you're smart. Ignore Donovan. He's paranoid," Brandon insisted during lunch, chewing thoughtfully on his sandwich. Their friend Jenna Roberts, an insightful girl with vibrant red hair and a fierce reputation for debate club victories, joined in. "Brandon's right," Jenna said firmly. "Donovan has had issues before. Remember last year when he accused Laura Chen without evidence? The administration did nothing then either." Caleb exhaled slowly, comforted but uncertain. "Yeah, but Laura was cleared eventually. Until then, half the school treated her like a criminal." Jenna's eyes flashed with intensity. "Exactly. And maybe that means it's time someone actually challenged these accusations head-on. Not just for you, Caleb, but for everyone." Caleb watched his friends, seeing clearly for the first time a potential turning point, a chance to fight back rather than silently endure. The three students finished lunch with a quiet determination settling between them, a fragile plan beginning to form. Over the next days, tension thickened the air at Lincoln High. Donovan openly scrutinized Caleb's every assignment, frequently questioning him in class with aggressive leading questions. Yet Caleb responded each time with calm, precise answers, gaining quiet respect among classmates. Meanwhile, Brandon and Jenna quietly gathered stories from others who had faced similar suspicions, mostly minorities or scholarship students. Patterns emerged, troubling enough that even students previously indifferent began whispering in troubled tones. When Caleb found himself once more summoned to the principal's office late on a Friday afternoon, the eyes following him now carried sympathy more than suspicion. Principal Carter, a dignified woman with a reputation for fairness, listened impassively as Mr. Donovan laid out his suspicions. Caleb maintained his dignity, explaining calmly but firmly his consistent study habits, pointing out the lack of concrete evidence. Principal Carter, however, seemed torn between loyalty to her teacher and the evident lack of proof. As Caleb left her office, he felt no relief, only the heavy weight of uncertainty. But outside, Jenna and Brandon waited, their expressions resolute. "This isn't over," Jenna vowed, eyes blazing with determination. Caleb managed a weak smile, grateful beyond words for their presence. Yet deep inside, he sensed this was merely the opening chapter of a much larger battle, one that would test friendships, confront hidden biases, and perhaps reshape their school entirely. Night descended quietly, stars emerging faintly over the suburb, promising nothing but uncertainty ahead. Caleb walked home slowly, each step echoing softly on the pavement, knowing in his bones that the storm had only just begun. The days following Caleb's meeting with Principal Carter dragged forward, each heavier and more suffocating than the last. The hallways of Lincoln High, previously a space of hope and new beginnings, now felt oppressive. Whispers and stolen glances accompanied Caleb everywhere, shadowing his steps like an ever-present ghost. But not everyone succumbed to suspicion. Brandon Walsh and Jenna Roberts stood unwaveringly at Caleb's side, their loyalty clear to anyone who watched. Their support felt like a lifeline in turbulent waters. Brandon was popular, a charismatic athlete known for fairness. His visible alliance with Caleb complicated the usual patterns of school gossip. Jenna, a fearless intellectual leader of the debate club, began speaking openly about the troubling nature of accusations without proof. It was Jenna who initiated the first real action. That Monday, after yet another uncomfortable chemistry class filled with Mr. Donovan's pointed glares and insinuations, Jenna approached Caleb, her eyes ablaze with purpose. "We need to document this," Jenna declared, pulling him aside during lunch. Her notebook was already covered with hurriedly written notes, details of incidents dating back months, names of other students who had suffered similar experiences. "If we gather enough evidence, the school can't ignore it." Brandon nodded vigorously. "I talked to Laura Chen again. She's still mad about last year, and ready to speak up if we push this forward." Caleb hesitated, biting his lip. His parents had always taught him to navigate carefully, wary of the repercussions of making waves, especially in a place where they already felt like outsiders. "But what if it only makes things worse?" he asked quietly, glancing around the cafeteria at the sea of faces, some openly hostile, others merely curious. Jenna placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Caleb, it's already worse. Right now, Donovan's accusations are unchecked. If we don't stand up now, nothing changes." Caleb took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. They were right. Silence had never protected him. It had only deepened suspicion. Reluctantly, yet resolutely, he nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The trio quickly became investigators, quietly and discreetly reaching out to past victims of Mr. Donovan's suspicions. Laura Chen, now a senior with college acceptance letters in hand, was their first breakthrough. Her recounting was vivid, raw with anger and frustration even a year later. "He never apologized," Laura said bitterly, leaning across the coffee table in her family's tidy suburban home as Caleb and Jenna listened intently. "Even when my scores were verified and my innocence clear, Donovan acted like nothing had happened. Principal Carter just swept it under the rug." Laura's father, quiet but stern, hovered nearby. "We considered legal action," he admitted, "but we worried about backlash. We wanted Laura's last year to be peaceful. Maybe we were wrong." Caleb's heart sank. Laura's situation mirrored his so closely, yet he felt strangely reassured. If she had endured and prevailed, maybe he could too. Jenna carefully documented everything Laura said, creating a detailed narrative to present to school administrators. They didn't stop at Laura. Over the next several days, they spoke discreetly with former and current students, uncovering an unsettling pattern. Donovan's suspicions disproportionately targeted minority students and scholarship recipients, individuals whom he seemed to perceive as outsiders, or less likely to succeed academically without cheating. Even Brandon, popular and well-liked, began to experience backlash for his vocal support of Caleb. Some teammates subtly distanced themselves, whispers of division filtering through the soccer locker room. Brandon, however, held firm. "Dude, if people want to turn their backs because I'm standing with you, let them," Brandon said firmly during practice, tying his cleats tightly with an intensity that mirrored his resolve. "This isn't about popularity. It's about what's right." Caleb felt profound gratitude, tempered by concern. Brandon was risking his own status for this cause. Caleb questioned whether he himself would have had the strength to do the same if their roles were reversed. It made him both proud and deeply uncomfortable. Their quiet investigation didn't remain hidden for long. As more students talked openly about their encounters, news spread rapidly. The school, usually complacent about internal matters, began to buzz with tension. Teachers murmured in faculty lounges. Some quietly supported Donovan. Others cautiously sympathized with the students but feared repercussions of speaking out. Caleb felt the pressure intensify. Donovan's antagonism escalated. His questioning in class became relentless, pointedly attempting to trap Caleb into contradictions. But Caleb, prepared and calm, answered perfectly each time, his responses earning grudging respect from classmates who watched the exchanges unfold. Yet outside class, anonymous threats and nasty comments began appearing. A hateful note slipped into Caleb's locker one afternoon read simply, "We don't want liars here." Another, nastier, mocked his intelligence and implied he was there only through affirmative action. Caleb felt rage and despair battling within him, but kept the notes hidden from his parents, knowing how deeply they would hurt them. Only Jenna and Brandon knew the extent of these harassments. Their anger propelled them forward, increasingly determined to expose the underlying prejudice festering beneath Lincoln High's pristine surface. It was in this heated atmosphere that an unexpected ally emerged. Emma Hastings, editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, the Lincoln Ledger. Emma, a senior whose journalistic instincts outweighed her fear of controversy, approached Caleb cautiously after school one day. "I've heard what's happening," Emma began carefully, her blue eyes studying him earnestly. "I've been skeptical at first, I'll admit that. But Jenna showed me your documentation. It's troubling." Caleb looked at her warily. "Why are you interested?" Emma hesitated, glancing around to ensure privacy. "Because I've seen this before. This isn't just about cheating accusations. It's deeper. It's racial bias, unconscious or otherwise. I think our school needs to confront it openly." Caleb was stunned by her directness. "You think people will actually listen?" Emma's gaze hardened, revealing a steely determination beneath her calm demeanor. "Maybe not everyone, but enough to make a difference." With Emma now involved, the situation escalated rapidly. She began gathering more detailed testimonies, recording incidents meticulously, preparing an investigative piece that would lay bare the uncomfortable truths the administration preferred hidden. Word of Emma's impending article spread quickly, stirring anxiety throughout the student body and faculty. Principal Carter summoned Emma, Caleb, Jenna, and Brandon into her office late one Friday afternoon, visibly troubled. "This school values fairness and transparency," Carter said carefully, her voice strained with worry. "But I must urge caution. Accusations can easily become sensationalized, damaging everyone involved." Emma respectfully but firmly pushed back. "Principal Carter, with all due respect, this issue has been ignored for too long. Students have suffered silently. Caleb is the latest victim, but he isn't alone." Caleb felt strengthened by Emma's clarity, despite his own lingering fears. Principal Carter, clearly torn, promised to investigate internally if Emma withheld her article temporarily. But Emma politely declined, convinced that public pressure was now the only real solution. Leaving the meeting, Caleb felt an uneasy mix of pride and dread. The article's publication was imminent, promising either vindication or an explosive backlash. As they exited the school into the twilight, Brandon broke their tense silence. "Things are going to get worse before they get better, aren't they?" Emma nodded solemnly, her resolve undiminished. "Yes, but change never comes easy." Caleb felt the truth of her words deeply, knowing the battle was far from over. The coming days promised uncertainty and conflict, but perhaps, just perhaps, also a chance at real, lasting change. The storm they'd anticipated was finally here, and it promised to reshape Lincoln High forever. The early morning sun painted Lincoln High's brick walls in warm golden hues, but inside, tension pulsed through every hallway. Emma Hastings' investigative article in the Lincoln Ledger dropped precisely at 8 a.m., and by first period, everyone in the school had either read or heard about it. Caleb walked through the entrance with a heavy heart, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him, each gaze sharper and more piercing than ever before. Emma's carefully researched piece was devastating in its precision. It chronicled incidents spanning years, naming Mr. Donovan explicitly and laying out multiple allegations from minority students unfairly accused or scrutinized without proper evidence. Caleb's own experience was at the forefront, serving as the catalyst that finally exposed an uncomfortable truth hidden in plain sight. By second period, the school was ablaze with reaction, anger, disbelief, denial, and even guilt. Students whispered nervously, unsure how openly they could discuss such explosive accusations. Caleb, Jenna, Brandon, and Emma sat quietly in the school library during their study break, deliberately removed from the chaos outside. Around them, shelves lined with books seemed to offer silent comfort, timeless reminders of ideals the school professed but had failed to uphold. Emma's phone buzzed continuously, messages flooding in, praise, criticism, questions, threats. She ignored them all, her focus resolute. "Did you guys see Donovan this morning?" Brandon asked, shifting uncomfortably. "He looked like he wanted to strangle somebody." Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "He's furious. Principal Carter summoned him immediately after the article went live. Rumor has it he's threatening legal action." Jenna scoffed, unimpressed. "Let him. We have evidence. If he sues, he'll lose badly, and he knows it." Caleb remained silent, staring at his hands, unable to shake off a nagging feeling of dread. The school had erupted around them, yet victory felt hollow. Despite knowing he had done nothing wrong, his heart raced with anxiety. How would his parents feel seeing his name publicly entwined with scandal? What backlash awaited him? His fears were soon realized when, before third period chemistry, he received a text from his mother. "We need to talk tonight. Your school just called us. Be careful today." Caleb felt nauseous. The thought of his parents enduring stress because of him added another layer to his burden. Yet beneath the anxiety simmered quiet anger, fueling his resolve. He hadn't chosen this battle, but now that it was here, he would not retreat. By lunchtime, students had divided sharply into camps. Many supported Caleb and openly praised Emma's courage. Yet a troublingly large faction viewed Caleb as a troublemaker, accusing him of unfairly damaging the school's reputation. Social media amplified the divide, as hashtags emerged and online arguments erupted. Tensions spilled openly into the cafeteria, usually a neutral ground, now sharply polarized. Caleb sat quietly with Jenna, Brandon, and Emma, trying to eat despite a lump in his throat. A group of juniors, mostly athletes close to Brandon, sat at a nearby table, their conversations tense and hushed. Brandon watched them warily. "They're mad," Brandon admitted reluctantly, nodding toward the athletes. "A few guys confronted me earlier. They think I've betrayed Donovan. They keep saying he's just strict, not racist." Emma snorted bitterly. "That's always the defense. But prejudice isn't always obvious. Donovan probably doesn't even realize what he's doing. That doesn't excuse it." Just then, Mark Jensen, captain of the baseball team and a friend of Brandon's since childhood, walked over hesitantly. His broad shoulders slumped, clearly uncomfortable. "Can I talk to you, man?" he asked Brandon quietly, deliberately avoiding Caleb's eyes. Brandon glanced at Caleb apologetically, then stood and stepped aside. Their conversation was animated yet subdued, Mark gesturing frequently, his face flushed with frustration. Brandon listened calmly but firmly shook his head. After several minutes, Brandon returned, visibly shaken. "What was that?" Jenna asked cautiously. Brandon exhaled slowly. "Mark says the teams are splitting apart. Some guys want me off soccer. They think supporting Caleb is causing too much damage." Caleb's stomach tightened, guilt surging again. "Brandon, I'm sorry." "No," Brandon interrupted sharply, determination hardening his voice. "You have nothing to apologize for. This isn't about me. It's about fairness." Despite his friend's support, Caleb felt increasingly isolated. Seeing Brandon suffer was almost unbearable. Quietly, he wondered if the price they were paying was becoming too high. Later that day, Principal Carter summoned an emergency assembly. The entire student body filed into the auditorium, a palpable sense of dread hanging heavily in the air. Teachers stood solemnly at the edges, their expressions ranging from sympathetic concern to thinly veiled irritation. Principal Carter stood at the podium, her usually composed face drawn and weary. "Students, today has been difficult. Allegations were made publicly against a member of our faculty. I assure you these claims are taken seriously. A thorough internal investigation has begun." A ripple of murmurs swept the auditorium. Carter continued, her voice carefully neutral, betraying neither condemnation nor defense. "I urge patience and civility during this process. Rumors, accusations, and judgments without complete facts harm everyone involved. Our community thrives on mutual respect, and I ask you all to uphold that principle. As Carter finished, Mr. Donovan suddenly stepped onto the stage, prompting an immediate hush. His eyes, dark and defiant, scanned the audience, locking onto Caleb with chilling precision. "I have served Lincoln High with integrity for over 20 years," Donovan stated firmly, voice shaking slightly with controlled emotion. "These accusations are baseless. My standards are high for everyone, regardless of their background. Cheating undermines education, and I stand by every decision I've made." His speech provoked scattered applause, largely from older students sympathetic to his narrative. Others shifted uncomfortably. Caleb felt anger surge at Donovan's subtle implication that Caleb had indeed cheated, an implication now stated openly before the entire school. After the assembly, chaos intensified. Arguments erupted openly in hallways. Friends confronted friends, and teachers debated privately behind closed doors. The once peaceful halls echoed with division. By evening, Caleb felt drained beyond exhaustion. His phone was a constant stream of notifications, texts of support mixed with hate-filled threats. He reluctantly met his parents after dinner, their faces tight with worry. His father spoke first, his voice deep yet gentle. "Caleb, this is serious. We spoke with Principal Carter. She's cautious, maybe even sympathetic, but the school board is now involved. Donovan has allies there." Caleb's mother reached for his hand. "We're proud of you. Standing up was brave, but now it's spiraling beyond control. Are you ready for what's next?" Caleb hesitated, the burden of their worry heavy upon him. "I didn't ask for any of this, Mom, but Jenna, Brandon, Emma, they're risking everything too. I can't just step away." His father nodded solemnly. "Then we fight together." Caleb felt tears sting his eyes, gratitude overwhelming him. Family unity fortified his courage, even as the road ahead loomed dauntingly uncertain. That night, Caleb lay awake, staring at his ceiling, the weight of events pressing down relentlessly. His mind raced, imagining tomorrow, wondering how much worse it could get. Would friendships survive? Could they really force change? Or would Lincoln High crush their rebellion, leaving permanent scars? Yet through his doubts, Caleb felt a quiet resolve strengthening. He was not alone, despite everything. Whatever awaited, retreat was impossible now. Tomorrow would come regardless, carrying conflict and uncertainty, but perhaps also a chance for justice. He closed his eyes finally, hoping for peace, knowing deep down it would not come easily, if at all. Outside, stars flickered softly in the cool suburban night, indifferent to the storm raging within Lincoln High. The fight had only just begun. The storm of conflict at Lincoln High didn't subside overnight. It deepened. Each passing day fractured friendships, strained alliances, and pushed every student and teacher to choose sides openly. Caleb awoke that Thursday to an inbox filled with both supportive and hate-filled messages. Every message weighed on him, amplifying the burden he carried. Still, he steeled himself, dressed carefully, and walked out into the crisp morning air, determined not to be intimidated. The walk to school was unusually silent, each step echoing with his anxious thoughts. Brandon had texted earlier, saying they'd meet up at Jenna's locker before class. Emma planned to join them later, busy fending off angry calls and messages about her explosive article. Inside, the school felt like hostile territory. Students who once ignored Caleb now openly stared or whispered behind cupped hands. Yet others, previously strangers, offered quick nods or smiles of encouragement. Caleb found himself caught between feeling like a pariah and a reluctant hero. Jenna and Brandon were already waiting, tense but resolute. Jenna's fiery red hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, a visual statement of her readiness for confrontation. Brandon, usually casual, wore an expression of hardened determination, his shoulders squared as if bracing for impact. "Did you see the emails this morning?" Jenna asked immediately, not bothering with pleasantries. Her tone was sharp, reflecting sleepless nights spent defending their actions online. "Yeah," Caleb said quietly, glancing nervously down the hallway. "Principal Carter said the school board scheduled a special meeting for next week. They're deciding Donovan's fate and talking about new rules for handling accusations." Brandon scoffed bitterly. "So, basically they're still stalling. They're hoping it all just blows over." Jenna's eyes flashed angrily. "We can't let them sweep it under the rug again. We have to keep pressure on them. Emma is already working on a follow-up piece." Caleb hesitated, weighing the consequences. "Maybe we should slow down a bit. People are starting to really suffer from this. Friends, teachers, even my family." It's hurting everyone. Brandon quickly shook his head, voice firm yet compassionate. Caleb, stepping back now means losing everything we fought for. Donovan will win by default. Caleb knew Brandon was right, yet doubts clawed at him. The cost felt overwhelming. Jenna noticed his unease and softened her tone. Listen, Caleb, we understand the risks, but look how much we've accomplished already. Students are finally talking openly about racism, fairness, privilege, topics this school has always avoided. Caleb sighed deeply, nodding slowly. You're right, but the next week is going to be brutal. Brandon squeezed Caleb's shoulder reassuringly. We'll handle it. Together. The bell rang sharply, forcing them apart and into their classrooms, each heading toward another round of whispered accusations and strained silences. Chemistry class, once Caleb's favorite subject, had become a daily trial. Today, Mr. Donovan stood at the front of the room, eyes narrowed, clearly bitter from recent events. His previously subtle hostility had transformed into open antagonism, each word laced with resentment. As Donovan passed out a pop quiz, clearly designed as retaliation, Caleb felt the teacher's icy glare fixed deliberately upon him. Some students here seem to believe academic integrity doesn't matter, Donovan announced sharply, his voice loud enough to silence any remaining whispers. But it does, especially in my class. Caleb gripped his pencil tightly, refusing to rise to the bait. Quietly, he completed the quiz, aware of every glance from classmates waiting to see if he'd crack under pressure. Yet Caleb, driven by silent defiance, finished confidently, setting his pencil down with deliberate calm. After class, Donovan pointedly stopped Caleb at the door. Students filed out slowly, curiosity evident in their lingering gazes. You may have others fooled, Caleb, Donovan hissed quietly, barely masking his contempt. But I know exactly what kind of game you're playing. Caleb met Donovan's gaze steadily. Sir, I'm not playing any games. I earned my grades fairly. You can investigate all you want. There's nothing to find. Donovan's jaw clenched visibly. We'll see about that. Caleb stepped out of the room, heart racing, but feeling a newfound strength. He refused to be cowed, even by someone as intimidating as Donovan. His defiance felt liberating. By lunch, the cafeteria was alive with new rumors. Brandon, Jenna, and Caleb regrouped quickly, their table a tiny island amidst waves of hostility and support. Emma joined moments later, exhausted yet determined, clutching a binder filled with notes and new testimonies. You're not gonna believe this, Emma began urgently, leaning in close to avoid being overheard. Another student just contacted me anonymously, said Donovan pressured him into falsely accusing another student of cheating last semester. Caleb's eyes widened, shock rippling through him. Seriously? Emma nodded vigorously, flipping through her notes. Yeah, Donovan apparently threatened the kid with expulsion if he didn't cooperate. The accused was another scholarship student, African American, who transferred out quietly afterward. Brandon shook his head slowly, incredulous. That's insane. If that's true, Donovan's been manipulating students, not just biased. Jenna sat back, absorbing the revelation deeply. This changes everything. If Emma can get the student to talk openly, it would blow the lid off the whole issue. Emma hesitated, troubled. But the student is terrified of retaliation. Donovan has deep connections here. The kid fears his parents will lose their jobs. His mom works for a company owned by a school board member. The implications hung heavily over the table, their excitement turning quickly to dread. This is bigger than just Donovan, Caleb finally admitted, realization dawning grimly. This means the board itself might be part of the problem. Emma nodded solemnly. Exactly. If the board is covering for Donovan, this fight could get uglier than we ever imagined. After school, the four friends convened at Emma's house. Her parents, both attorneys, listened quietly, offering cautious guidance as the teenagers laid out everything they'd uncovered. Emma's mother, Patricia, spoke carefully. This new allegation about Donovan manipulating students is explosive but risky. Without definitive proof, Donovan could sue for defamation. Emma's father, David, interjected thoughtfully. But if the student agrees to a formal statement, the school board would have no choice but to act. Caleb felt anxious yet oddly reassured by the adult's serious attention. So, how do we proceed? Patricia sighed deeply. Proceed carefully. Talk privately with the student again. Assure confidentiality, protection. If the student refuses to go public, we respect that. But document everything meticulously. Caleb nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. Jenna took detailed notes, strategizing carefully. By evening, exhausted yet driven, Caleb returned home feeling marginally hopeful. As he entered, however, his mother's expression immediately extinguished any optimism. "The board called again," she said gravely. "Donovan filed a formal complaint against you. For harassment." Caleb felt as though the floor had vanished beneath him. The fight had just escalated dangerously. Late into the night, Caleb lay awake, anxiety spiraling through his thoughts. Donovan's formal complaint intensified everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, even greater hostility, and heightened stakes. Yet beneath his fear surged fierce determination. Donovan's latest move had revealed desperation. The teacher was feeling the pressure. Maybe their fight was finally turning in their favor. Caleb closed his eyes, steeling himself for what would inevitably be the most brutal phase yet. Allies stood firmly beside him, evidence continued accumulating, and despite Donovan's threats, they had truth on their side. Tomorrow, Lincoln High would become a true battleground, and Caleb would face it head-on. The air in Lincoln High on Friday morning crackled with tension, electrified by rumors and simmering conflicts that had reached every classroom, every hallway, every corner of the campus. Caleb felt as though he were walking through a battlefield, each step carrying him deeper into enemy territory. Yet his resolve had solidified overnight. Donovan's formal complaint of harassment had crystallized Caleb's purpose. Now he had no choice but to see this fight through to the end. Upon entering the building, Caleb immediately noticed the increased security presence. School resource officers stood conspicuously near doorways and intersections of corridors, their vigilant eyes scanning the crowds of anxious students. Principal Carter's reaction had been swift, attempting to maintain control, preventing arguments from spiraling out of hand. Yet the visible authority only heightened tensions, fueling more whispers and wary glances. Brandon and Jenna were already gathered at Jenna's locker when Caleb approached. Brandon's jaw was clenched tight with frustration. Jenna's expression, always confident, now bore the shadow of anxiety. Emma joined seconds later, clutching her smartphone tightly. "Did you see this?" Emma said urgently, showing them her screen. On it, a group chat screenshot displayed ugly threats directed at Caleb, along with mocking taunts aimed at Brandon and Jenna. Caleb felt a tight knot of dread twist painfully in his stomach. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly, trying to appear calm. Emma hesitated, biting her lip nervously. "Bad enough. It's a private group of Donovan's supporters, mostly older students, some athletes. They're saying you orchestrated this whole thing for attention. But some threats are serious, talking about cornering you after school." Brandon shook his head angrily. "We need to report this immediately." Emma nodded. "I already sent it to Principal Carter. But the problem is, some board members think we're exaggerating the situation to deflect attention from the complaint Donovan filed." Caleb's fists clenched involuntarily. "So I'm accused falsely of cheating, and now I'm also accused of creating threats against myself?" Jenna placed a steadying hand on Caleb's shoulder. "It's ridiculous." But clearly Donovan's allies are feeling the heat. They're resorting to desperate tactics. Caleb exhaled slowly, trying to regain composure. "We just have to stay calm and keep documenting everything." They dispersed quickly as the first bell rang, each disappearing into separate classrooms, isolated yet unified by their shared determination. In chemistry, Donovan seemed emboldened by his formal complaint, his demeanor arrogantly defiant. Caleb took his seat quietly, maintaining careful composure despite the teacher's penetrating glare. Donovan began class aggressively. "Today we'll be reviewing advanced concepts. Those of you who've genuinely earned your grades shouldn't struggle." His pointed glance lingered harshly on Caleb. Caleb met his gaze unflinchingly, silent but defiant. Throughout the lesson, Donovan's questions targeted Caleb relentlessly, each inquiry designed to trip him up, expose him publicly. But Caleb answered each clearly, accurately, and with an assured calmness that quietly impressed classmates, even those sympathetic to Donovan. After class, Donovan's voice was laced with restrained fury as Caleb gathered his things. "You might think you've won, Caleb, but this isn't over. Your games have consequences, more than you realize." Caleb paused, turning slowly to face him, his voice steady but firm. "The only game being played here is yours, Mr. Donovan, and everyone's beginning to see it." The brief exchange was witnessed by several classmates lingering by the doorway, their expressions unreadable, torn between loyalty to Donovan and grudging respect for Caleb's courage. Lunch became a strategic meeting. The four friends huddled closely over cafeteria trays, their conversation urgent and intense. As they spoke, an unexpected figure approached. Samantha Blake, the the quiet student council vice president, known for rarely involving herself openly in controversies. "Can I join you guys?" Samantha asked cautiously, glancing nervously around before sitting. Jenna nodded in quiet surprise, quickly sliding over. "What's up, Sam?" Jenna asked curiously. Samantha hesitated, clearly uneasy. "I've been watching this unfold silently, but after seeing Emma's article and the messages being sent around, I couldn't stay quiet. There's something else you should know." Caleb's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Samantha lowered her voice, glancing anxiously at nearby tables. "Donovan has supporters inside the student council too. Some members have quietly started petitioning students, trying to discredit you and pressure Principal Carter to suspend you." Emma exhaled sharply, anger flashing in her eyes. "This goes even deeper than we thought." Samantha nodded gravely. "I overheard them this morning. They plan to accuse Caleb of orchestrating the threats to gain sympathy. They're presenting it formally to Principal Carter tonight." Brandon shook his head, disgust evident. "We can't let this happen." Samantha nodded again, her resolve visibly growing. "That's why I'm here. I'll testify publicly if needed. They trust me. Maybe I can expose their lies from the inside." Caleb stared at her gratefully yet worriedly. "Samantha, that's risky. You could lose everything." She smiled faintly, determination evident. "You're already risking everything. It's my turn to help." That evening, Principal Carter convened an emergency meeting with Caleb, his parents, and members of the school board. Caleb sat nervously beside his parents, heart pounding as they entered the large, imposing conference room, eyes immediately meeting the stares of Donovan's allies, seated stiffly across the polished table. Principal Carter's voice broke the tense silence. "This meeting addresses two urgent issues: the harassment complaint filed by Mr. Donovan and the disturbing threats circulating among students." Donovan sat quietly, his eyes cold, expression unreadable but clearly confident. A board member, Mrs. Diane Hartman, immediately interjected, tone curt. "We've reviewed the complaint carefully. These accusations of racial bias against Mr. Donovan are serious, but without concrete evidence they verge on defamation." "Caleb, what evidence can you provide?" Caleb felt the room tighten around him, voices pressing closer. He steadied himself, responding calmly yet strongly. "We've documented multiple incidents involving minority students unfairly targeted by Mr. Donovan. These aren't isolated cases. They form a clear pattern." Donovan's lawyer, Mr. Reese, interjected dismissively. "A handful of accusations doesn't prove bias. It could merely indicate consistent enforcement of standards." Caleb felt frustration surge, carefully controlled. "Then explain why all students accused without proof have been minorities or economically disadvantaged." Mr. Reese stiffened visibly, clearly unprepared for Caleb's directness. Principal Carter quickly intervened. "We have documentation from Emma Hastings, detailed accounts, and testimonies from multiple students. We cannot simply dismiss these claims." Another board member, Mr. Lawrence Foster, spoke cautiously, turning toward Donovan. "Were you aware that certain students have faced severe personal consequences due to accusations made without adequate evidence?" Donovan's jaw clenched tightly, voice strained. "I maintain my standards fairly." "If consequences occurred, they're beyond my control." Caleb's mother spoke suddenly, her voice shaking slightly but powerful. "My son's life has been turned upside down, yet he faces this bravely because it's right. Can the board not see the obvious injustice here?" The room was silent, tension palpable, each person grappling internally with the weight of her words. Leaving the meeting, Caleb felt drained yet cautiously hopeful. The board had delayed action, promising a final decision within days. Outside the building, Caleb's parents embraced him quietly. "You did well, son," his father said gently. "We're proud of you." Yet as Caleb headed home, a new text lit his phone, a chilling threat. "Back down now, or you'll regret it forever." The message, anonymous yet clearly real, made Caleb's breath catch sharply. The battle at Lincoln High was spiraling dangerously, threatening more than reputations. Caleb sensed that whatever came next would test every ounce of strength and courage he possessed. Tomorrow loomed darker than ever, the final battle lines now starkly drawn. Caleb woke early the next morning, unrested and uneasy. The threatening message from the previous night haunted him. The cold words etched sharply into his mind. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his thoughts spinning relentlessly. Was it worth continuing this fight? Was justice truly achievable, or was he risking too much? His own safety, his family's stability, even the well-being of his closest friends. His phone buzzed softly, interrupting his doubts. It was Brandon. "Meet me and Jenna before school. Important." Caleb rose quickly, heart pounding, dressing hastily and slipping quietly out the door. The crisp morning air chilled his skin, yet it sharpened his mind, clarifying the stakes. At their usual spot near Jenna's locker, Brandon paced restlessly, his eyes heavy with concern. Jenna leaned against the wall, arms crossed protectively, worry clear in her normally steady expression. Caleb approached cautiously, sensing something troubling had happened. "What's wrong?" Caleb asked immediately, noting Brandon's tense posture. Brandon sighed deeply, hesitating before finally speaking. "Someone vandalized Jenna's locker this morning. It's covered in graffiti, nasty stuff aimed at all of us." Caleb's chest tightened painfully. "What did it say?" Jenna spoke quietly, voice shaking slightly. "Liars. Traitors. Worse things too. Racial slurs. Threats. Principal Carter already photographed it and had custodians clean it off. But people saw. It's bad, Caleb." Caleb's fists clenched in helpless rage. "This is getting dangerous. I got another anonymous threat last night too. They're escalating." Brandon nodded grimly. "Yeah, it's coordinated now. Whoever's doing this wants to intimidate us into silence." Caleb hesitated, anxiety rising. "Maybe we need to back off for a bit. It's too dangerous." "Jenna, Brandon, you shouldn't have to risk yourselves for this." Jenna immediately shook her head, determination flaring in her eyes. "No way. If we stop now, Donovan wins. They want us scared, silenced. We have proof. We have allies. We can't let fear stop us." Brandon agreed emphatically. "Exactly. Besides, Principal Carter saw the vandalism firsthand. They're forced to take it seriously now." Caleb sighed deeply, feeling the strength and conviction of his friends bolster his faltering resolve. "All right, but we have to be extremely careful. No risks." They agreed quickly, breaking apart as students began arriving. Yet Caleb's anxiety lingered, gnawing persistently at the edge of his thoughts. The stakes had risen dramatically. This wasn't just about grades or accusations anymore. This was about safety, fear, and the willingness to stand firm despite terrifying threats. Later that morning, as the first bell rang, Caleb was unexpectedly called to Principal Carter's office again. Dread pooled instantly in his stomach, fear spiraling. Had another false accusation emerged? Principal Carter greeted him solemnly, motioning Caleb to sit. Beside her desk sat a familiar figure, Laura Chen, the student Donovan accused unfairly the previous year. Caleb's pulse quickened nervously. "Laura has something she wishes to share," Carter began cautiously, her expression serious yet oddly hopeful. Laura took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself before speaking. "Caleb, after I saw everything you're facing, I knew I had to come forward officially. Principal Carter has promised protection, so I'm here to give my full statement. I was unfairly targeted last year, pressured by Donovan's accusations until I nearly transferred. I stayed silent to avoid conflict, but I can't anymore. Not after seeing what you're enduring." Caleb felt relief flood through him, gratitude mixed deeply with empathy for her courage. "Laura, thank you. You don't know how much this helps." Laura nodded softly. "I do, actually. It could finally expose Donovan's pattern. Principal Carter already recorded my statement." Carter interjected gently. "Laura's testimony changes things dramatically, Caleb. It adds undeniable credibility to your allegations. The board will review it tonight. Donovan's claim of harassment against you is weakening rapidly." Caleb's spirits lifted briefly, hope flickering back to life, yet uncertainty still nagged sharply. "Does this mean it's finally over?" Carter's expression softened sympathetically. "Not yet, but it's a turning point. With Laura's testimony, the board cannot ignore Donovan's actions anymore." Caleb thanked Laura earnestly as they left the office together, feeling slightly lighter for the first time in weeks. Yet lingering unease shadowed his relief. Would Donovan and his allies respond with even greater desperation? Chemistry class later felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Donovan appeared visibly rattled yet defiant, pacing aggressively at the front of the room, eyes glinting dangerously. Laura's public statement had clearly rattled him, but rather than softening his approach, Donovan doubled down. As class began, Donovan addressed the room coldly. "Integrity and truth matter deeply. Some students here believe attacking my reputation achieves justice. But remember, lying has consequences." His gaze settled directly onto Caleb, heavy with thinly veiled threats. Yet Caleb held steady, meeting Donovan's glare with quiet confidence. He sensed Donovan's hold weakening, felt the teacher's desperation boiling close to the surface. Throughout class, Donovan's questioning grew increasingly erratic, attempts to trip Caleb up becoming desperate and transparent. Yet Caleb remained composed, answering calmly, effectively neutralizing each attack. Classmates shifted uneasily, visibly uncomfortable with Donovan's escalating hostility. As class ended, Donovan held Caleb back again, anger barely controlled. "You think this little stunt with Laura will save you? I built my reputation here for 20 years. No kid destroys that without consequences." Caleb felt anger rise sharply but controlled it firmly. "Your actions destroyed your reputation, Mr. Donovan, not me." Donovan leaned in close, voice dangerously low. "Be careful, Caleb. You're playing a dangerous game. People who push too hard often end up regretting it." The explicit threat sent chills down Caleb's spine, yet he held his composure, silently leaving the room, heart pounding violently. That evening, Caleb and his family gathered quietly, trying to find calm amid turmoil. His phone buzzed suddenly. A new, chilling message. "Last warning. Drop this now or someone gets hurt." Caleb's breath caught painfully. He showed the message immediately to his parents, whose faces paled visibly. His father took the phone, voice tight with restrained fury. "We're reporting this to the police immediately," he stated firmly. "This has gone too far." Caleb felt nauseous, guilt surging at the thought of his family endangered. Yet beneath it, resolve hardened. He couldn't surrender now, not after how far they'd come, not with so many risking so much. Late that night, a sudden noise outside startled Caleb awake. Peering through his window blinds cautiously, he spotted movement. A shadowy figure hastily retreating down the street. Caleb's pulse spiked fearfully. He rushed downstairs, throwing open the door. A crude message had been scrawled across their driveway, fresh red paint glaring violently under moonlight. "Liar. Last chance." His parents, awakened by noise, joined him in shocked silence, taking in the vandalism. Caleb's mother trembled slightly, eyes wide with fear. "Enough is enough," his father said tightly. "This stops now." Caleb stood frozen, heart racing with realization. The threats had become physical, tangible. The fight was spiraling dangerously. Whoever opposed him had crossed a line from intimidation into outright danger. Yet through his fear, Caleb felt profound clarity. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about standing firm against hatred, bias, and injustice. Despite the fear gripping him, Caleb knew retreat was impossible. Tomorrow promised greater danger than ever before. But Caleb's courage had become absolute, unwavering. He would face whatever came next, even if it meant risking everything he held dear. The fight had reached its most dangerous crossroads yet. The sun rose pale and uncertain over Lincoln High, its weak glow barely piercing through the thick fog that blanketed the suburban neighborhood. Caleb stood at his bedroom window, still shaken from the night's disturbing vandalism. The crude red letters painted across his driveway haunted him, an inescapable visual symbol of escalating violence. The threats had evolved from vague online warnings to overt acts of intimidation. The gravity of the situation had finally hit home, leaving Caleb's family unsettled, vulnerable, and profoundly afraid. That morning, breakfast was silent and strained. Caleb's mother moved slowly, her usual comforting presence subdued by worry. His father, grim-faced, spent most of the meal on the phone with the police, coordinating a meeting later that morning. Caleb barely touched his food, anxiety coiling tightly in his stomach. He could feel the tension like electricity in the air, raw and volatile, ready to explode. His phone buzzed, breaking his grim reverie. Jenna's message was brief and urgent. "Everyone knows about the vandalism. Emma says Principal Carter is calling an emergency assembly first period. Meet us at my locker immediately." Caleb exhaled sharply, feeling dread rise alongside a strange sense of relief. The threats were now impossible for the school to ignore. Perhaps finally, decisive action would come from those in power. Arriving at school felt surreal. Students gathered outside, clustered in tense groups, whispering anxiously. Many stared openly at Caleb as he approached, expressions ranging from supportive concern to wary suspicion. Brandon and Jenna stood near Jenna's locker, their faces taut with worry. Emma paced restlessly, clutching her notebook tightly. "Caleb, are you okay?" Brandon asked urgently, placing a reassuring hand on Caleb's shoulder. "We saw photos online. It's everywhere." Caleb sighed deeply. "Physically, yes, but my parents are terrified. The police are involved now." Jenna's eyes darkened angrily. Good. Whoever did this needs to be held accountable. Emma stepped closer, lowering her voice cautiously. Principal Carter knows she has a crisis on her hands. She called an emergency meeting with the school board this morning. Word is the police investigation will pressure them into finally acting. Caleb nodded slowly, barely comforted. I just hope they do something meaningful. Emma's gaze hardened. If they don't, the newspaper will expose everything publicly. Threats, vandalism, Donovan's harassment. They can't hide anymore. As students began filing toward the auditorium, Caleb felt simultaneously hopeful and fearful, caught between anticipation of justice and dread of further escalation. The auditorium was packed, tension thick as students whispered anxiously. Principal Carter stood gravely at the podium, flanked by stern-faced police officers and visibly tense school board members. Donovan sat stiffly near the front, eyes fixed coldly ahead, betraying no emotion. Carter cleared her throat firmly, voice echoing across the crowded space. Students, our school faces a grave crisis. Last night, a student's home was targeted by an act of vandalism and intimidation. This act crosses every boundary of decency and civility. It demands immediate, decisive action. A hush settled, the seriousness of her tone silencing even the most cynical whispers. She continued forcefully, anger carefully restrained. Lincoln High will fully cooperate with the ongoing police investigation. Additionally, we will initiate an internal inquiry led by independent investigators to examine claims of bias, misconduct, and intimidation within our community. A low ripple of shocked murmurs swept through the auditorium. Carter paused briefly, allowing the weight of her announcement to sink in. Effective immediately, Mr. Donovan is placed on paid administrative leave pending investigation outcomes. Harassment, threats, racism, or retaliation in this school will not be tolerated under any circumstances. A collective gasp echoed across the auditorium. Donovan's face paled visibly, jaw tightening in fury and disbelief. Caleb felt a complex mix of relief, victory, and dread. Carter's announcement marked a significant step forward, yet he knew backlash would intensify dangerously from Donovan's supporters. The battle was far from over. Principal Carter's closing words carried a heavy warning. To whoever carried out last night's vandalism, know that we will find you, and you will face justice. News of Donovan's suspension ignited immediate turmoil. By lunchtime, the school had polarized further, with heated debates erupting openly in classrooms and hallways. Donovan's supporters accused the administration of caving to public pressure, blaming Caleb for instigating chaos. Yet many students, encouraged by the school's decisive response, openly defended Caleb, praising his bravery and courage in standing firm. The cafeteria atmosphere was charged. Caleb, Brandon, Jenna, and Emma sat together, sensing both solidarity and vulnerability. Approaching suddenly was Samantha Blake, visibly shaken, her face pale with fear. "What's wrong?" Jenna asked immediately, noticing Samantha's trembling hands. Samantha leaned in, her voice quivering. "I overheard some athletes talking in the locker room. They're planning something after school, targeting Caleb directly. They blame him for Donovan's suspension." Brandon stiffened instantly, jaw clenching angrily. "What exactly did you hear?" Samantha exhaled shakily. "They mentioned confronting Caleb physically. They said, he'll regret ever opening his mouth." Caleb's stomach twisted violently. The threat was clear, tangible, immediate. He felt a surge of dread coupled with stubborn resolve. "We have to report this now. The police are already involved. This proves how dangerous things have gotten." Emma quickly agreed. "I'll inform Principal Carter immediately. This can't escalate further." Yet Caleb felt anxiety grow sharper, more immediate. If the threats were openly violent now, what protection could the school realistically offer? As school ended, Principal Carter arranged police escorts stationed visibly around campus exits, providing reassurance yet increasing tension. Caleb felt awkwardly exposed, aware of every eye watching him closely. Despite protection, his nerves tightened painfully. Walking toward the parking lot, flanked by Brandon and Jenna, Caleb spotted a group of Donovan's athletic supporters lingering near the gates, expressions openly hostile. Caleb recognized Mark Jensen and several older football players, anger clear in their posture. Mark stepped forward aggressively, addressing Caleb coldly. "You happy now? You ruined Donovan's life. Maybe you think you're some hero, but you're just causing problems." Brandon immediately interposed, voice calm but firm. "Back off, Mark. Caleb didn't cause this. Donovan did." Mark sneered, moving closer threateningly. "Careful, Brandon. Keep defending this liar and you'll regret it too." Suddenly, one of the police officers approached rapidly, sensing escalation. "Break it up now," he ordered sharply. Mark hesitated, glaring angrily but backing away reluctantly, his group dispersing. Caleb's relief was palpable yet temporary, knowing the confrontation was merely postponed. Threats were becoming physical, immediate, and frighteningly real. At home, Caleb's parents remained tense, the household subdued, filled with cautious anxiety. A police cruiser patrolled periodically, providing temporary reassurance. Yet fear lingered, palpable and inescapable. Caleb sat alone in his room, troubled by his own reflection. Had he underestimated the consequences of seeking justice? Was this struggle truly worth endangering everyone he cared about? Yet beneath fear, clarity persisted stubbornly. Retreating now meant surrendering everything: fairness, dignity, truth. Caleb knew instinctively that he couldn't abandon this fight, even at the steepest cost. As darkness enveloped the house, Caleb's phone lit again, another anonymous text sending ice-cold dread through him. "You can't hide forever. Watch your back." Caleb's breath froze painfully. Despite police intervention, the threat remained dangerously real, a sinister shadow lurking relentlessly behind every step, yet he refused to retreat. The line had been drawn irreversibly, the fight now a matter of principle, courage, and defiance in the face of escalating danger. Caleb closed his eyes finally, steeling himself for whatever came next, knowing with grim certainty that the battle at Lincoln High was about to reach its ultimate climax. The weekend brought no relief to Caleb. Instead, tension hung thickly within the walls of his home, every creak or passing car amplifying his family's anxiety. Police officers periodically checked in, offering reassurances, but Caleb's parents remained deeply unsettled, constantly glancing toward windows and doors. Fear had seeped into their daily routines, twisting simple acts like grocery shopping or taking out the trash into nerve-wracking ordeals. Sunday evening, Jenna texted Caleb, urging him and Brandon to meet her and Emma at a small cafe near her neighborhood. The cafe, a cozy spot called the Brood Awakening, offered a momentary escape from the intense pressures surrounding them. Arriving early, Caleb settled into a booth, his stomach tight with anticipation. Jenna arrived soon after, accompanied by Brandon, whose typically carefree demeanor was overshadowed by exhaustion. Emma followed closely behind, carrying her ever-present notebook, filled now with detailed notes and additional testimonies from former students. Caleb broke the tense silence first, voice weary yet determined. "What's the latest? Have you found anything new?" Emma nodded, quickly flipping open her notebook. After Principal Carter's announcement suspending Donovan, more students started reaching out, mostly anonymously, but their statements matched Laura Chen's testimony. "Donovan's bias is undeniable, but we have a bigger issue now. Some school board members seem sympathetic toward Donovan. He's quietly rallied support, claiming he's being unfairly targeted by overly sensitive students." Brandon's jaw tightened with anger. "They're still trying to downplay this, even after everything?" Emma sighed deeply. "Exactly. Donovan is well connected. His supporters argue the suspension is premature and politically motivated. They're demanding the board reinstate him immediately." Jenna leaned forward, eyes blazing with frustration. "But the police investigation should change things, right? They can't just ignore vandalism and direct threats." Emma hesitated, her expression growing troubled. "That's the hope. But without concrete evidence directly linking Donovan himself to the threats, it's challenging. Right now, it's just speculation he's connected." Caleb felt helplessness twist sharply within him. "So, what now? Donovan just gets to sit back while someone else does his dirty work?" Emma shook her head slowly, determinedly. "No. The police investigation is getting deeper. Eventually, they'll uncover who's responsible. Donovan's suspension buys time for the truth to surface." Caleb nodded, slightly reassured but unable to shake persistent anxiety. Each passing moment heightened the danger, making patience feel impossible. Monday morning, Lincoln High felt different. Donovan's absence created a strange atmosphere, a vacuum that seemed to amplify tensions rather than ease them. Students divided openly into factions. Donovan's supporters became more vocal, defiantly sporting shirts reading "Stand with Donovan." Conversely, many other students wore symbolic wristbands promoting unity and fairness, silently opposing intimidation and bias. Principal Carter convened another brief assembly, sternly reminding students of zero tolerance for threats or bullying. She emphasized the ongoing police investigation and warned that further intimidation would result in immediate expulsion and possible criminal charges. Her words, strong yet burdened by visible exhaustion, briefly calmed the storm, though underlying tension persisted. Afterward, Emma approached Caleb urgently in the hallway, pulling him aside. Listen, Caleb, I have another idea. It's risky, but it might finally tip the scales. Caleb looked at her warily. Riskier than what we're already dealing with? Emma nodded solemnly. There's a board meeting tomorrow evening. It's supposedly closed to students. But Samantha Blake found a way for us to speak publicly during the meeting's open forum. If you make a personal appeal directly to the board, describing exactly how Donovan's accusations have impacted you and your family, it could dramatically shift the narrative. Caleb's heart raced anxiously at the thought. Speaking openly to the board felt intimidating, even dangerous. Yet beneath fear, he knew Emma was right. Personal testimony would be impossible to dismiss. Brandon approached cautiously, overhearing the conversation. Caleb, you don't have to do this. You've risked enough already. Caleb exhaled sharply, voice quiet yet resolved. No, I do. Emma's right. They need to see the human cost. If it's just accusations on paper, they'll downplay it. But if they see my family, hear exactly what we've endured, maybe they'll finally understand. Emma's eyes softened, admiration evident. It could finally break through their denial. Caleb nodded slowly, decision settling heavily but firmly within him. I'll speak. It's time they face the truth directly. Tuesday evening arrived rapidly, nerves taut as Caleb, his parents, Jenna, Brandon, Emma, and Samantha Blake gathered outside Lincoln High's main auditorium. Security was heightened, police officers stationed prominently throughout the building, emphasizing the seriousness of recent events. The board meeting was crowded. Teachers, parents, community members, and media filled every available seat, drawn by widespread coverage of the scandal. Tension permeated the auditorium, hushed whispers blending anxiously. Principal Carter opened the meeting formally, acknowledging community concerns and briefly outlining recent events. The floor then opened for public comments. Emma spoke first, her statement forceful yet professional, meticulously outlining documented evidence of Donovan's pattern of bias and intimidation. Jenna followed, emphasizing broader implications, how the school's reputation depended on genuinely addressing these issues. Brandon's brief, passionate plea focused on the ethical imperative of action, highlighting courage amid adversity. Finally, Caleb stepped forward, pulse pounding, throat tight with anxiety. The entire auditorium quieted immediately, every gaze fixed intently on him. Donovan's supporters glared coldly, openly hostile, while many others watched sympathetically, expressions encouraging yet anxious. Caleb took a deep breath, steadying himself, and spoke clearly, honestly, and openly. My name is Caleb Mitchell. Over the past weeks, my life has been shattered by false accusations of cheating from Mr. Donovan. Despite no evidence, he openly questioned my integrity, casting suspicions solely because of assumptions about my background. These accusations escalated into threats, harassment, vandalism against my home, and constant fear for my family's safety. I did nothing wrong except excel academically. But Mr. Donovan's unfounded suspicions triggered a wave of intimidation that changed everything. My parents, who moved here seeking better opportunities, now live in constant fear. I've endured racial slurs, online harassment, anonymous threats, and physical intimidation. This is the reality I live every day, all because Mr. Donovan decided I couldn't possibly achieve what I had earned honestly. Caleb paused, voice shaking with raw emotion, the room utterly silent, captivated by his genuine vulnerability. If this board ignores this truth, if it reinstates Donovan without accountability, you send a message loud and clear that fairness, justice, and student safety are negotiable. But these values aren't negotiable. This isn't just about me. It's about every student who ever feared standing up against injustice. Tonight, you choose either accountability or complicity. Please, choose wisely. Caleb stepped back slowly, heart pounding violently, hands trembling yet feeling oddly empowered. Applause broke spontaneously across the auditorium, many standing to support Caleb's bravery and clarity. The aftermath of Caleb's testimony was immediate. News media broadcast his speech widely, amplifying pressure on the board. Social media exploded with support, Caleb's honest vulnerability resonating powerfully with broader communities beyond Lincoln High. Calls poured into the school, demanding transparency and accountability. Yet Caleb knew Donovan's supporters would retaliate fiercely, threats escalating dangerously now that Donovan's future was openly threatened. That night, returning home, Caleb found another chilling anonymous message taped crudely to the front door, harsh letters stark under porch lights. You went too far tonight. You'll regret every word. Caleb stared silently, fear and anger mingling sharply. He'd known speaking publicly would carry consequences, yet he refused to yield to intimidation. Inside, his parents read the message gravely, their expressions deeply troubled. But Caleb's father spoke firmly, pride evident despite his obvious worry. "You did the right thing, Caleb. Whatever happens now, we face it together." Caleb nodded solemnly, resolve unshakable despite growing danger. He had spoken truth openly, powerfully, undeniably, and truth always carried a price. The battle at Lincoln High had reached its fiercest moment yet, promising consequences that Caleb was now ready, if afraid, to face head-on. The aftermath of Caleb's public address at the school board meeting reverberated throughout Lincoln High and far beyond its suburban borders. Overnight, Caleb had unwittingly become the symbol of a deeper struggle within the community, a face representing justice, fairness, and the courage to challenge long-standing prejudices. Wednesday morning brought a deluge of media attention. Local and even national news crews hovered near the school's entrance, eager to capture reactions from students and faculty. Reporters tried approaching Caleb's family at home, though his parents, overwhelmed yet protective, shielded him carefully from the invasive spotlight. Yet despite growing support, Caleb felt increasingly vulnerable. The threats hadn't stopped. Instead, they'd intensified. His phone buzzed relentlessly, alternating between messages of heartfelt support and cruel, menacing threats. The recent anonymous note taped to his door after the meeting lingered ominously in his thoughts, constantly reminding him how real and immediate the danger had become. At school, Brandon and Jenna acted as protective shields, rarely leaving Caleb's side. Emma's investigative reporting intensified, highlighting systemic failures at Lincoln High that allowed Donovan's pattern of biased accusations to persist unchecked for years. Samantha Blake quietly continued her behind-the-scenes support, funneling information from the student council, now sharply divided. Despite Principal Carter's public declarations and increased security presence, anxiety simmered openly in hallways and classrooms. Donovan's supporters, though quieter now under intense scrutiny, still openly resented Caleb, some viewing him as the direct cause of their favored teacher's professional ruin. Late Wednesday afternoon, Emma urgently called for a private meeting at the library downtown, far from the prying eyes and ears of Lincoln High. When Caleb, Jenna, and Brandon arrived, Emma was already waiting, visibly tense but energized. Spread across the table before her were pages of printed text, screenshots, and documents marked with colored sticky notes. She wasted no time. "I've found something significant," Emma began quickly, her voice low but charged with urgency. "The police obtained a warrant to investigate the vandalism at your home. They traced an IP address from some of the threatening online messages." Caleb's heart quickened anxiously. "Did they find who's responsible?" Emma hesitated briefly, then nodded, looking directly at Caleb. "Yes, it's Mark Jensen and several of his closest friends, football and soccer players closely allied with Donovan." Brandon's jaw clenched tightly, anger evident in every line of his face. "Mark Jensen? I knew he was hostile, but direct threats and vandalism?" Emma sighed deeply, sympathetic but firm. They found paint matching the graffiti at Caleb's home in Jensen's car. They also discovered group chats explicitly coordinating threats to silence Caleb. Jenna's voice shook slightly, anger and relief blending oddly. "This proves everything. Donovan's accusations directly inspired this violence." Emma nodded firmly. "Exactly. The police already took Jensen and 2 others into custody. Principal Carter's demanding expulsion immediately. But there's more. Jensen admitted privately that Donovan had subtly encouraged students to handle the situation themselves." Caleb's stomach twisted sharply, anger mingling deeply with relief and vindication. "So Donovan directly incited this violence?" Emma hesitated slightly. "Not explicitly enough yet to guarantee charges, but Jensen's testimony implies Donovan strongly hinted that threats and intimidation were acceptable." Brandon stood abruptly, pacing angrily. "So Donovan still might escape consequences?" Emma shook her head emphatically. "No. Jensen's admission is enough to ensure Donovan won't return to Lincoln High. The school board faces overwhelming public pressure. This scandal is too severe. They'll have to permanently remove him." Caleb sat back slowly, processing the enormity of the revelation. Donovan's subtle instigation had escalated threats from mere online hostility to genuine violence, directly targeting Caleb's safety and family. Anger surged through him, yet alongside it grew profound relief. Finally, tangible accountability loomed. Early Thursday morning, Principal Carter called Caleb and his parents for a private meeting in her office. Caleb's stomach twisted nervously, anxiety coiling painfully despite recent developments. Upon arrival, Caleb was startled to find Donovan already seated stiffly inside, accompanied by his lawyer, Mr. Reese. Principal Carter's expression was icy, her tone sharp and uncompromising. "Mr. Donovan requested to address you personally," Carter explained coldly, clearly disapproving yet bound by procedural fairness. "You don't have to accept." Caleb hesitated briefly, exchanging a cautious glance with his parents, then nodded firmly. "No, I'll listen." Donovan shifted uncomfortably, voice strained with tightly controlled anger. "Caleb, this situation spiraled further than intended. I never condoned violence. I uphold strict standards. Perhaps mistakes were made, misunderstandings occurred, but I never explicitly instructed anyone to threaten you." Caleb felt anger flare sharply but restrained himself carefully, maintaining composure. "Maybe not explicitly, but your accusations created an environment of hostility and suspicion that made threats inevitable." Donovan's jaw tightened visibly, frustration evident. "My intentions were never racial or malicious. I enforce standards consistently." Caleb leaned forward slightly, voice calm yet strong. "But you didn't. Every student you accused without evidence was either minority or disadvantaged. Your suspicions systematically targeted us, implying we couldn't succeed fairly." Donovan's expression darkened angrily. "That was never my intention." Principal Carter interjected sharply. "Intentions matter less than consequences. Your actions directly contributed to a toxic environment, fostering threats and violence against students. Regardless of explicit instruction, you bear clear responsibility." Donovan fell silent, clearly furious yet recognizing defeat. Carter turned directly to Caleb, voice gentler but firm. "Caleb, your bravery forced this school to confront its failures openly. We owe you gratitude and a sincere apology. Lincoln High failed you, but your courage brought change. Permanent, necessary change." Caleb nodded slowly, gratitude mingling deeply with lingering anger and relief. Donovan's future at Lincoln High was over, yet Caleb understood scars remained, deep and painful. By midday, Principal Carter officially announced Donovan's permanent removal, citing the severity of incidents connected to his actions. Mark Jensen and 2 others faced expulsion and criminal charges. Media coverage intensified, portraying Caleb's courage favorably and highlighting systemic issues now openly acknowledged within Lincoln High and beyond. Yet Donovan's supporters, though diminished, became more hostile, directing anger and resentment toward Caleb. His parents remained deeply protective, anxious yet proudly supportive of his courage and integrity. That evening, at home, Caleb sat quietly with his parents, finally breathing deeply, processing everything that had occurred. The fight had exacted a heavy toll, emotionally, physically, mentally, yet justice had prevailed. His courage had forced accountability, bringing genuine change to Lincoln High. Late that night, alone in his room, Caleb received another message. Not a threat this time, but something far more meaningful. "Caleb, it's Laura Chen. I just wanted to thank you personally. Your courage helped me finally speak openly about the injustice I endured. You inspired others to stand up too. Because of you, no student at Lincoln High will suffer silently again. Thank you." Caleb smiled softly, relief finally overpowering lingering fears. The painful struggle had mattered deeply, creating tangible progress and validating every difficult choice he'd made. Yet despite triumph, Caleb knew scars remained, deep wounds inflicted by threats, fear, and hatred. The journey toward healing would be slow, demanding strength and patience. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, stars glittering faintly. Caleb watched quietly, realizing his struggle was bigger than personal justice. It symbolized resilience against injustice everywhere, reminding him that courage always carries a cost, but also that truth, ultimately, is worth every painful sacrifice. Tomorrow awaited uncertain yet hopeful. A world changed profoundly because he refused to be silenced. Caleb awoke early the next morning, sunlight filtering gently through the curtains of his bedroom window. For the first time in weeks, a strange calm settled around him. The storm that had torn through Lincoln High and his life had finally subsided, leaving a quiet, reflective peace in its wake. Yet beneath this calm lay complex layers of emotion: relief, exhaustion, lingering anxiety, and cautious hope. Though Donovan had been removed permanently and justice had prevailed, the path forward remained unclear. Breakfast was unusually tranquil. Caleb's parents moved softly through the kitchen, preparing coffee and pancakes, an attempt at normalcy after weeks of turmoil. They spoke quietly about mundane things: grocery lists, weekend plans, family visits. Yet beneath their casual conversation hovered a shared sense of cautious optimism, tinged slightly by lingering worry. His father finally addressed the unspoken thoughts hanging between them. "Caleb, we're proud beyond words. You stood your ground under enormous pressure and danger. Not many adults could have done what you did." Caleb shifted slightly, appreciating his father's words yet feeling a subtle discomfort. "Thanks, Dad. But I couldn't have done it without you. Without Jenna, Brandon, Emma, and everyone who stood with me. It wasn't just my fight." His mother reached gently across the table, squeezing his hand softly. "It's true, but you inspired them. Your courage drew others forward. That's real leadership." Caleb smiled faintly, warmed by her sincerity. Yet privately he still wondered if the cost had been worth it. Threats, fear, vandalism. These scars ran deep. Justice had prevailed, but at significant personal cost. The journey to school felt surreal. Caleb approached the familiar building cautiously, noting how the usual noisy chatter at the entrance seemed more subdued, respectful. His classmates regarded him differently now, not merely as the victim of harassment, nor just as a courageous figurehead, but as someone who had forced everyone to confront difficult truths they had long ignored. Inside, Principal Carter greeted him warmly, genuine respect evident in her eyes. "Caleb, welcome back. You've shown incredible strength, and this school owes you a profound debt. Please know you have our full support moving forward." Caleb thanked her quietly, appreciating the sincerity of her words yet still grappling with his newfound role as a catalyst for change. Throughout the day, interactions with classmates varied deeply. Many approached him with quiet gratitude, students he barely knew expressing admiration and thanks. Others kept their distance, their silence betraying residual hostility or discomfort. Donovan's former supporters, those who remained, generally avoided him, their resentment palpable but no longer openly aggressive. Brandon and Jenna were unwavering in their support, their friendship deeper now, forged in the crucible of shared struggle. Emma's investigative journalism had earned wide respect, her reputation firmly established as fearless and principled. Samantha Blake quietly returned to her usual reserved self, though Caleb noticed subtle recognition from others, appreciating her discreet courage in confronting student council corruption from within. By lunchtime, the cafeteria atmosphere felt distinctly different, calmer, reflective. Caleb sat with his friends, conversation initially quiet, contemplative. Emma finally broke the silence, cautiously optimistic. "It feels different today, doesn't it? Like the air itself changed." Brandon nodded thoughtfully. "It had to. Donovan's removal was only the beginning. But at least people can talk openly now about issues they always ignored." Jenna leaned forward, eyes bright with determination. "Exactly, and that openness is critical. Lincoln High needed this reckoning, painful as it was." Caleb hesitated slightly, voicing lingering doubts. "But will it last? Change isn't easy. People often prefer forgetting uncomfortable truths." Emma's expression hardened slightly, resolute. "We'll ensure they don't forget. That's our responsibility now, making sure the lessons stick." Caleb nodded slowly, feeling the weight and power of her words. Their fight had revealed systemic problems impossible to ignore. But true change required persistent vigilance, ongoing effort. Weeks slowly passed, allowing healing to gradually begin. Caleb's life returned to some semblance of normalcy, though scars remained. Counseling sessions arranged by the school helped him navigate lingering anxiety from threats and trauma. His family drew closer, their bond strengthened profoundly through shared adversity. Media attention gradually diminished, yet Caleb's story continued resonating quietly within Lincoln High and the wider community. Conversations about fairness, racism, and privilege became more commonplace. Principal Carter implemented mandatory training sessions addressing unconscious bias and racial sensitivity, steps previously dismissed as unnecessary. Laura Chen remained an occasional confidant, their shared experiences forming an unspoken bond of mutual respect and understanding. Her encouragement had profoundly impacted Caleb, reminding him his courage had inspired others to reclaim their own voices. One afternoon, Principal Carter called Caleb to her office again, this time with an unexpected proposal. "Caleb, the school district is starting a student-led diversity and equity advisory committee. They asked specifically if you'd consider leading it. Your experience uniquely positions you." Caleb hesitated briefly, anxiety flickering momentarily, yet quickly replaced by quiet resolve. "I'll do it. It's important to keep these conversations going." Principal Carter smiled warmly. "I thought you'd say that. It won't be easy, but you'll have full support." Caleb nodded firmly, sensing an important new purpose forming. Something positive, meaningful, emerging from painful experiences. Months later, graduation arrived under clear, brilliant skies. Caleb stood among classmates, cap and gown crisp in the warm sun, his family proudly watching. Brandon and Jenna stood close, friendships deepened irreversibly through shared struggle and triumph. Emma delivered the valedictorian address, speaking passionately of courage, justice, and the power each individual possesses to ignite genuine change. Though she never directly named Caleb, her words resonated clearly throughout the audience, acknowledging his profound impact. Afterwards, students exchanged emotional goodbyes, excitement and nostalgia blending warmly. Caleb's parents approached, eyes glistening with pride. His father embraced him tightly. "We're endlessly proud, Caleb. Not just of graduation, but everything you've endured and accomplished." Caleb's mother smiled softly, voice gentle yet deeply meaningful. "You faced challenges most never encounter. Yet you emerged stronger, wiser, kinder. We couldn't ask for more." Caleb blinked back tears, deeply grateful yet humbled. Brandon and Jenna joined quietly, their bond strong, unbreakable. Brandon grinned warmly. "We survived it. And you changed Lincoln High forever, Caleb. Don't ever forget that." Caleb smiled faintly, profoundly appreciative yet still reflecting on heavy costs. "We all did. None of this happened alone." Emma approached softly, notebook finally absent, replaced by genuine warmth. "It mattered, Caleb. Every bit of it. You showed Lincoln High that real courage can change everything." Caleb exhaled slowly, nodding thoughtfully. "It was hard, painful. Sometimes I doubted it was worth it. But now, I think maybe it was." Emma smiled quietly, voice gentle yet resolute. "It absolutely was." Years later, returning for a Lincoln High reunion, Caleb found the school genuinely changed. Diversity and fairness policies firmly embedded. Donovan's story became a powerful cautionary tale, a reminder of past failures and future vigilance. Passing the advisory committee's dedicated office, now a permanent institution, Caleb paused quietly, memories flooding powerfully back. Beside the door hung a small plaque reading simply, "Change demands courage. Justice requires perseverance." Smiling softly, Caleb reflected deeply. His struggle had indeed carried deep scars, yet produced lasting progress. The community now openly addressed bias, injustice, and equality, discussions previously impossible. His experiences, painful as they'd been, sparked genuine, lasting transformation. Caleb understood now clearly. The journey toward justice never ends. It demands continuous courage, persistent vigilance, willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Yet despite inevitable costs, he knew deeply, justice, fairness, equality were always worth the struggle. Quietly satisfied, Caleb turned slowly away, grateful beyond words his courage had mattered profoundly, echoing powerfully through time, inspiring generations that followed. His story, once filled with conflict, intimidation, fear, now became legacy. Courage confronting injustice, truth triumphing ultimately over fear. Walking away quietly beneath a softly glowing sky, Caleb felt finally at peace, knowing deeply his battle had profoundly mattered, changing forever the lives of countless others. This, Caleb realized profoundly, was the enduring power of courage.